Greetings, everyone. Nathan Nerdarch here from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerd, hanging out with a nerd.
Staff writer Josh.
And today we're going to be talking about whatever we feel like talking about. And Josh had some things he was interested in bringing up, so we were going to start with those, and then we're going to get into the chat as needed.
Yeah. So yeah, my first thought process is with is kind of the interesting place that we're in with Dungeons and Dragons, where we're looking at how the hobby is expanding, and then how not just official developers and authorized developers are monetizing, but also like how players are monetizing. Like, you know, is there a demand for like pay to play for DMs, like at either local shops or online, or, you know, and then also things like, I'd also like to kind of go in about homebrew stuff, which used to be free in the past, and then when you add things like Dungeon Masters Guild, all of a sudden we're looking at, you know, adding money to the process.
All right. That sounds
okay,
good. So we kind of did a video on pay-to-play dungeon mastering, as well as Dave, Nerdarchist Dave, went for an interview at Dawn Forgecast site, YouTube channel, and they talked about that at length. And the major takeaway I've got from those two major discussions, plus looking at everything on the internet, is that, you know, for the most part, everybody's got their price. You know, well, not everybody. I'm sorry. There are many people who complain that they are not going to pay for whoever XYZ Dungeon Master. But if someone comes up to them and says, hey, how much would you pay to go hang out with this famous person? Or, you know, like, I think Ted or somebody or Dave was like, oh, yeah, I'd pay a certain amount of money to play with Vin Diesel just because. Right. So that's, if you've got that price, like, oh, I'll put in, you know, $100 to play a game in a game with Matt Mercer. Like, not that that's available, but, you know, if it was, would you pay $100? And if you would, then it's just your price does not include, or your interest does not include paying the particular people you saw as GMs for them. So you want to pay for them, but you pay for somebody. So you'd pay to play. It's just you don't want to play with any of these people you're seeing so far. Is the gist in that regard. So
yeah, and I can see that, like, because if they're a normal person, I can see that to some degree. On the other hand, depending on your GMing style, like me, I'm like you, I'm a preparer. I will easily spend twice the session amount in preparation. So if I'm playing a 4-hour session, or if I'm running a 4-hour session, I'm planning for 8. And so that's a lot. I mean, I don't mind doing that for my players personally. I know, because I enjoy the storytelling process. I'm a writer, I'm an actor. I love the storytelling process. But at the same time, if there were other people who don't have that kind of person in their life, you know, and if I run 5 games in a week, that's a 40+ hour week. That's a 40, well, almost a 50, that's like a 60-hour week. So, you know, that's my whole week. You know, and then on top of that, you have things like DMs buy all the books, DMs buy all the minis and the settings, they create the maps. You know, there's all these other things that go into the cost of D&D.
Yeah, and a lot of times the DM tends to pay for those. There was you know, talking in the comments, and one of the things was, well, oh, we just split the cost with the Dungeon Master for everything. So, but again, you're saying you spend 8 hours for a 4-hour session. I don't nearly do that much, but I do prep more than the rest of Nerdarchy does.
Right.
Because it helps with my anxiety and my other issues with being worried about how the game's going to go. It's like, even if you know you can do something, you might still want to prepare to do it, so that if something goes wrong, like there was a game I started where I was extremely stressed out because I had just barely made it. It was like I drove 3 hours. I'd done something else. people were late and everything was getting shuffled around. I was like, am I even going to make it for this game that I'm running? I don't know. So what I came to do was just like, well, I had it written down. So I was like, well, in the end, I'm prepared. No matter how crazy I feel, I can just sit down and get into the game and go. And by being prepared, I wasn't frazzled from that aspect, just frazzled from all the rest of the day.
Right.
And there's also been times where I mean, like my wife was in the hospital and I showed up to Philly's Game Con probably 10 minutes before I had to play my game. So, you know, she was fine and she was okay, but she had been in the hospital earlier that night. Let's say 12 to 13 hours previously, she had been in the hospital. I had like a nap and then I was going and doing that stuff. So it was kind of crazy. So, I've had a few crazy times where I had to professionally perform because Philly's Game Con, it was like at a convention with, you know, I'm wearing all the stuff that says Nerdarchy, and it would be really crummy to do a game for people that signed up and do a bad job at it. So I was prepared for it. I had it written out like a module, and that helps get focused back on. You can always go back. You're like, oh, I'm stuck. It really reduces the time of time when you're thinking about stuff, because you can just, oh, I don't remember exactly where I am. I will just look back at my elaborate notes. And, oh, I can read this description now. I'll read this description. And you know what? I've changed. I ad-lib the descriptions even though I've written them, because I know I have something to fall back on if I get lost or screw up on something. So it's a way easier for me to fluidly go in between creating my own stuff just right then, as well as going back to my notes to kind of like get where I'm going. It's kind of like the difference between reading a speech as it was written on like a card or something like that, and, you know, just having notes on a speech and then doing it like that.
Well, and I think that's how I would say that I DM. Like because when I prepare, I don't just do like I'm a huge nerd. I mean, huge, like lots of types of nerd, movie nerd, literary nerd, all that other stuff. And so, like, as much time as I spend on the adventure, I also spend on, and one of the reasons why it takes so long is that I spend all these like meticulous moments, like including maybe a nod to a movie, or like the first adventure that I created for my players. I created the cast of the Firefly, and so I went through and I watched every episode like 2 or 3 times in a row, meticulously getting the characterizations down. And so even though I never said that their name was, you know, Malcolm Reynolds, you know, when Jane, his character, who was a half orc, he would act like Jane, you know, and he would say Mal. And if the players knew Firefly and if they love Firefly, that was the extra little added bonus, you know, because even though the adventures itself took, you know, maybe 2 to 3 hours to do, I spent a lot of time filling in other little holes to make the experience more enjoyable for my players. And I worked on my performances for each of the different NPCs to kind of like flesh them out, because I spent like 15 years acting. Like, I mean, it was like from when I was like 6 to like 21, and doing various local theater and, you know, plays at church and school and all sorts of other things. And so to me, like, when I'm a DM, I'm an actor, and I'm honing my ability to characterize. And that means that I want to have a strong sense of the character, because I don't want my players to just like, I don't want to just like have the, you know, NPC be like, oh, I'm going to attack you now. Like, I want, why is that character this way? You know, what kind of person is in a thieves guild? You know, what kinds of people, what kind of backgrounds do they have? You know, so even if they only see this pirate, which is my first adventure was pirates, even though they only saw the characters for maybe 10, 20 minutes, I had an understanding of each character, and it made the difference, because the first encounter they captured the pirate, and I had to have an understanding. Like, it helped because they interrogated the pirate, and they spent 20, 30 minutes on that one character, trying to get information out of her. And because I had that characterization ready, it made the world so much more believable.
Yeah, rather than just have pirate 1 through 5, you had a concept in your mind for when they capture, if they capture somebody or interact with somebody, or their motivations. Like, when is somebody going to, in which situations, if the pirates win, how are they going to treat the players? If the pirates lose and they try and retreat, or would they try and retreat? Like, all those kind of things going to factor in to, having that all known ahead of time and having the way you're going to portray the characters. That takes a bit more brain power, but if you're looking at Dungeons and Dragons DMing as this is your calling for how you should act and how you're going to treat that role as Dungeon Master, then I think that's pretty cool, but a bit more work than I can put into it. But I do enjoy having the mentality of the creatures and seeing like, oh, well, are they going to just react in a kind of generic goblin way? Or, if it's a goblin, what kind of personality do they have? Are they cowardly? Are they arrogant? Or, what kind of little ins and outs of different characters? And I usually kind of figure out how they're going to react if one of them gets captured. But I don't, aside from that, I don't necessarily say to myself, I'm going to make all of the goblins how they're going to act, and then whichever one gets captured is going to be like, I usually have like a capture scenario in my head. How are they going to act compared to the party? All that kind of stuff. So, but
you don't necessarily want to create a full backstory for something that is whatever, but I would like to have at least a generalized idea of each character. And then sometimes you also have to, like, because that game I wrote about in my article about critical successes and critical failures in skills. Mm-hmm. And I talked about how my player rolled a critical success on intimidation, right? And they had a wolf with them. My gnome ranger had a wolf as her pet. And because she wasn't level 3 yet, so it wasn't a beast companion, it was a pet. And so he used the pet wolf, to really as an intimidation process. And so even though I had this like sense of this character where she was kind of like, she was new and she was kind of flippant, she didn't really take her job that seriously because she was young, and young people are, you go to McDonald's, and that's kind of the mentality that I had for that character. But then with that roll of a natural 20 on that skill, I had to insert automatically a new character piece where she's afraid of dogs. And you have this snarling wolf like inches from her face. Like, she no longer cares about anything else other than that dog, and that dog not eating her. And so her entire outlook had to switch on a dime, but I at least was able to start with something. And so when she shifted her mentality instantaneously, it felt real and natural.
That's a good way of. I like the crit successes and crit fails, and incorporating that into how the NPCs are going to be portrayed.
Yeah,
I think it also helps because it makes the players' roles seem more impactful.
Oh, absolutely. I've even started experimenting with the idea. I have to find a new party because I moved back from Texas to Oregon. I have to find a new party, but I'm experimenting with the idea of characterizations based on so if it takes 5 to pass and you get a 15, well, adjusting the degree of success, not just whether you pass or fail system. So if you get a 5, if you need a 5 and you get a 15, then you success more, on top of the idea of a crit. So if you need to barter with somebody and you overroll, they're going to give you a better discount than if you just passed it, kind of situation. I haven't implemented that yet, but that's kind of a thing that I think creates a more real environment for my players, is to consider, and the same thing on the opposite direction. If you need to roll a 20 and you roll a 5, you know, like failed, you know, they're like, they're going to take the item off the table, you know, on that barter. They're going to be like, no, I'm not selling this to you. You are clearly not taking this seriously.
Yeah, or you insulted me with your offer, or
yeah, exactly,
something.
Exactly.
All right, I wanted to go back and answer a little bit of what. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you, AJ. I just switched over and saw the thing.
Hold on just a second.
He said that he read my article and really enjoyed it, and I appreciate that. It's hard to know as a writer because we don't always get as much. Like, I'm sure a lot of the articles are read and appreciated, but nobody like, there's not a lot of people who are commenting on it or sharing on it. They're like, oh, this is a really great article. I really enjoy it. And I like reading, you know, Nigel's articles, and I read them every time, but they don't comment on them and they don't share them. So it's hard for us as writers to know necessarily, you know, how much people are enjoying our work. So it's great to hear that. It really is.
Yeah, we're getting a little interaction on the website, but not as much compared to, I think, how many people actually see it.
Right. Exactly.
I think, you know, what is it? If you think about it, even on YouTube, we could get 10,000 views and not have 100 comments. It's just kind of,
yeah.
So, but I have to say, for articles, it seems like there's less interaction. Like, you could get 1,000 views and only get one comment, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and that's one of those things too. Like, that's why I try to engage with, if people notice, as long as it's like, and even if it's negative comment or whatever, as long as it's constructive, I try to engage as much as I can, because I feel like, you know, I mean, everyone who brings well thought out comments and arguments to the table should have the opportunity to be addressed.
Yes, I wanted to get a little into the comments, the chat, to kind of go through their stuff and then head back to what we're talking about. So David.
Oh, okay. Asa is AJ. Oh, okay. Oh, Kenny. Duh. I just saw AJ and skipped my brain to AJ. Oh, that's cool. Hi, Asa.
So David Bliss is talking about turning Warhammer Fantasy Runesmith into a class. So it's like close combat, but also has like low-level magic item making. And you know what? I would suggest taking a look at the Artificer, the UA on the Artificer. They make just every couple levels, they just make a magic item. So that might be something to look into, because you can augment that perhaps to serve a purpose for that. And I'm always in favor of using rules that are already there rather than making up stuff, because some thought on balance has already gone into the rules that they crafted, and it's easier to balance the rules that are already there are very similar rules, like just augmented slightly. It's easier to balance that against the rest of the classes when it's already been considered. And let's see.
I actually wrote an article about that, about design philosophy, and talking about how, like, sometimes you want to create something new. Like Doug made a blue mage for the barbarians. Those mechanics are so wildly different that it made sense to create a whole new class for it. But when, like, the UA, they added the samurai added very little, you know, to the actual fighter class, and a lot of that you could have just supplemented, you know, role play, you know, with a lot of those features that they had. Like, you could have easily taken the champion and then just role play the samurai, because there wasn't enough added to make it a valuable effort.
Well, the thing I liked about the samurai is it was kind of specific in what it was doing. And it was more of like the samurai from anime rather than like the historical representation. So,
well, yeah.
and I like that kind of stuff. So it was cool from what I was seeing with it. So
I mean, I don't think it was a bad class. I think it was just a little superfluous, because like even with the wild mage, I like the wild mage mechanics, but you could literally just as easily role play a number of those. Like, you could like literally go yourself, choose, okay, I'm going to roll a d20, and then whenever I use a spell, before I use a spell, and if I get like a 1, then I have to pick a different spell, Like you could just as easily have that kind of the role play element to create the same kind of feel. I mean, they did more with the Wild Mage Sorcerer than that, but I still feel like they didn't necessarily need to have it.
You know what I don't like about the Wild Sorcerer is it feels so underpowered compared to the Dragon or Draconic Origin Sorcerer. It messes up trying to make other sorcerers. Do you know what I mean? Because there's only the two. If they had given a third option,
yeah,
you could better say, okay, the Wild Mage is just underpowered compared to the other two. But because they didn't, like if they had Favored Soul in the original core book, along with Sorcerer, it would have been like, wow, okay. You know, if that's what that's going on as, then I could see that being, well, Favorite Soul, actually, they turned into a different type of class rather than just simply an archetype. But the idea of something akin to that power level, or if they had Storm Sorcerer and Draconic Sorcerer in there, you could have a better understanding of what kind of power level you should go with when you're creating your own Sorcerer origin. But with Wild Mage in there, it just throws off the average. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, I can see that where if they'd switched the Tempest and the Wild Mage, so the Wild Mage was a Skag archetype, and because I think Tempest is a much better archetype, I really do.
The Shadow Sorcerer is also, I think, a decent archetype.
Yeah,
and
I'm really looking forward to the Favored Soul because I like the idea of a healing sorcerer.
I like the Favored Soul because it's kind of just like the divine hero.
Right.
Rather than just a spellcaster or, you know, just a fighter. It's a different archetype compared to Eldritch Knight. Like you can't do Favored Soul as an Eldritch Knight.
Right.
I mean, you could, but it's only one particular sliver of what a Favored Soul would be, rather than the way they did it in the UA. That just makes more sense, and it looks more like what the Favored Soul concept is.
Right. Well, then they have a paladin. A paladin's basically a divine Eldritch Knight anyway.
Yes, and I think Favored Soul fits nicely in between those. It's not like just rehashing something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. That's why I like Favored Soul. I hope that's one of the ones that makes it into Xanathar's.
So Fragminator 1369, you're talking about ordering the crate. It should be the dungeon crate. So I was trying to look up some information on that, but I'm not seeing the actual which video it is, but it's in one of the live chats we talk about it. So actually the live chat before the last live chat, that's the weekend live chat. So 32, Quests and Adventures 32 should be where you'd find the information if you need to look it up. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. If I remember correctly.
Yeah. So as going back to the archetypes, yeah. So Wild Mage, I don't know how they could have made it to the same power level. It's just wild magic. It's kind of like being a warlock as a spellcaster instead of being a sorcerer. You're like, you didn't pick warlock because it was a better spellcaster. You picked it for all the other interesting things that you get with it. So similarly, I feel like wild magic, you don't pick it so that you can finally get spell bombardment at 18th level or whatever. You know what I mean? You pick it because you want to be a wild mage.
Yeah, because you like the idea of total unpredictability, that at any moment you can either do the most amazing thing or devastate your party.
Yeah, or kill the party or turn into a blue plant, you know, like all those things. Yeah. And
exactly.
And that's why you pick it. But you could, it's like the people that go like, well, I purposely didn't optimize my character because I want it to be RP. I was like, you can still have a character that doesn't suck as per the rules and RP. But it's like,
what?
I mean, that's a whole conversation. But you know, the idea like wild magic could have been cool thematically as well as actually on par with the regular draconic sorcerer.
I totally agree with you because I think that's one of those things that like people forget. Like you do what you're good at, right? Like I suck at math and sciences. I'm terrible. I barely made it through like algebra for non-math majors. Like I was like,
Okay.
I'm an idiot in math.
That actually tells me a lot because
yeah,
that's like the math, the lowest math you can take that would actually be considered like the math classes like in college and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, idiot, can you figure out the FOIL system? Yes, great. I'm not good at math. Class. Yeah, you exactly.
Yeah, well,
but that's why I'm not a math guy.
Yeah, Ted's very similar in that respect. I think he didn't take very high math, and on the other hand, I was like in calculus 3 and physical chemistry and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, see, my sister did that too when she went to school, and so but she's like a science person, right? But I can write a paper. I can write a 5-page paper, first draft, no rewrites, barely going back through for spelling and editing, and get a B. So guess what I'm going to do in my life? I'm going to be a writer. I'm not going to be a scientist, And so optimization, like having character concepts and then optimizing within, I think that is not just a valid way of going about things. I think it's the smartest way for RP because you're as a person. If you're really good at hitting things, you're not, if you're really big and strong and buff and you're not very smart, you're not going to be a wizard, And
you can always have that unless your character personality is stubborn and ignorant.
True.
Like if you like tenacious levels of stubbornness. I said that incorrectly, but you know what I mean? Like have a tenacity for going the wrong way. When someone tells you can't go down that path, because you're a dumbass. You shouldn't do this because you're stupid. No, I'm doubling down on wanting to be a magic caster now.
Well, then you can also I have an idea for a game a one-shot that I want to run, or maybe even a small arc of, I call the Other Guys, where you take the stat array and you drop it by a few points. And so everybody is slightly suckier at their job, because everybody gets to play the big strong guys. I think it'd be fun to be kind of barely good at it and still have to go up against the same level of monsters, and creatures and do all those stuff. And so it would be kind of the same idea where you're still putting yourself at a disadvantage, but you're still optimizing yourself the best you can given your limited capabilities.
Yeah, I have a nature cleric who's a reluctant cleric in Ted's game for the Curse of Narcitus, and I had a 14 wisdom to start. I just got it to be I'm like a 14th level character, and I just got it to be a 16 a little bit ago.
Yeah.
Because he was chosen. He wasn't naturally so good that one of the clerics in region said, "Hey, you're going to join us and come on over here." So, he was more spread out. Like he doesn't have a dump stat pretty much. The way I built him. So that's the way I kind of see is, you can be like, so not maximum optimization, but still be playable and usable in the game, as well as do what you want to do character development wise. And in fact, 14 gets you a +2 in the game. So I mean, it is definitely above average. But playing a wizard who starts with a 10 intelligence,
exactly.
Kind of not feeling it.
Unless you're really feeling like, I guess, challenging yourself to that really weird nth degree. Oh, and by the way, it's a Snoopy. Asa was asking what the stuffed animal was. It's a Snoopy. Earlier, because I was trying to figure out for the longest time what it was, but I think because if you look at Vax in Critical Role is a prime example of taking that role playing element, because he jumped from rogue to paladin, and that's not exactly an optimal jump. It's not like going from rogue to ranger, or the way that Vex in the series did. She once Vax switched over to paladin, she started taking levels in rogue because that's what she wanted. That's what she wanted to play in the first place, was a rogue, but she didn't want to have 2 rogues in the party. But that's not a very logical jump to go from those two. Those two are about as opposite as you can get.
Well, I mean,
And
you'd have to see some kind of like character, I think, story arc to make that make
right,
sense.
and that's why he went into Paladin. He was already developing a story arc to build towards Paladin, and then he had to made a deal with a god to save his sister. And then he became a Paladin that way. But yeah, it was like, very much
my sister, I'll do this.
Yeah, exactly. And so then he became the Raven Queen's chosen champion. You know, and so it's a really cool way that there is a way to role play to make it make sense, but you've got to do the legwork to really make it make sense. And you can't do ones like wizards aren't a calling; it's a thing you study. So being a level or a 10 intelligence wizard doesn't make a lot of sense, unless of course it's like you're not very smart, but your parents donated to the Harvard of wizard schools, and so you get an in. You know, you really got to build up that RP element a lot in order to justify my opinion as a real person.
You are the 7th generation of mages.
Right, exactly.
You are going to go to the same tower, the same gray tower that we all went to.
Exactly.
Your 5 great-grandfather built that tower.
Exactly.
Like, but I'm a dumb moron that got hit in the head with a ton of bricks when I was younger. So no. You're going. It's
yeah. And that's a great characterization. I love that as an actor. I would love that as a challenge as an actor to have to play this role. You're like, yeah, I'm a wizard. I'm not very smart, but you still managed to muddle your way after 8 years of wizarding school to, maybe 2 years later than you should have to be a wizard.
Yeah, and playing that character maybe once, but if that's like all the characters you ever play are like fighters with no strength, or and then that's kind of like it becomes really super cliche at that point.
Right. Well, and you don't get to explore because, like I said, I think of each character as a person. How would a person react? You do what you're good at, unless there's a reason for it. Like your family is,
Even that, I could see the guy that gets stuck being in the wizard school. I could see him like doing calisthenics and running out into the woods at night and killing monsters with a stick or something. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like youthful rebellion. Like, oh yeah, I'll be a wizard. I just have 5 levels in fighter and 1 in wizard.
I can see that. Yeah.
So he's like actually like adventurer class like strength wise, but in the school of mages, he's total crap.
Exactly.
And I could see that being a really cool fighter mage, or an Eldritch Knight, kind of scenario where it's just like, I kind of learned it, but it kind of stunk. I don't even know. Is there an intelligence requirement for Eldritch Knight? That might mess up the plans.
Because they use 13. Wizard. because Eldritch Knight is you need intelligence. It's wizard spellcasting, kind of like a
it'll be intelligence.
Arcane, arcane trickster. Same.
But
thing.
I was wondering,
which I think is
do you need like a certain intelligence level to do that?
That's what I was wondering. I don't think so.
Yeah, well, someone in the chat figure out that for us if you need it for Eldritch Knight or Arcane. But if you were a fighter wizard, you'd have to have a 13 intelligence at least for game wise. But I would totally let someone multi-class as a as a fighter wizard if it was like a game that started late, like 3rd, 4th level. Like sure.
Right. Well, you could also start out as a wizard and then multi-class into fighter. So that way you wouldn't need to have the high, because there's no requirement to get into or to start as the class, only to multi-class into it.
Okay.
So you could level 1 wizard, level 2 fighter, and so forth.
Yeah, but so that's an interesting, compelling character. If that's not the only type of characters you play, is what I would say.
Absolutely.
That's my caveat. If you only play, like I said, fighters who are weak, rogues who trip over themselves and are clumsy, paladins who couldn't convince a rock to go follow them, if you play those kind of things, it's like it becomes a caricature of stuff, rather like it's like a mockery at that point. I don't know. Right. It just doesn't. I think it's really super uncool. and that's a super nerd saying. It's super uncool, so you know that's pretty bad.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, because there was somebody in the chat on the Saber Dice who saw the Saber Dice stream, by the way, yesterday. I thought it was amazing, all the character interactions. These guys like Taking 20, Cody from Taking 20, both the people from WebDM, Dawnforge Cast, and is that everybody? Am I missing somebody?
Taking 20, Dawnforge Cast,
I think that's
Dave,
everybody.
and yeah, no, that's all of them.
Sorry if I missed somebody, but it was really good, and the interaction was great. And there's like these people in this chat complaining about how they just kind of attacked the first group that they came upon. And it's like, oh, I guess this is going to be like super heavy comment. I was like, good God, these people, like, give them a little bit of time. You've never watched this game before. They obviously didn't watch Session Zero, because Session Zero, oh yeah, and Dave from Nerdarchy.
yeah, Dave from Nerdarchy, yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
That's
I met the other non-Nerdarchy people that were on Safer Dice yesterday. Not anybody that was on it from Nerdarchy. I auto-included Dave so much that I forgot to mention him. so you know, it was like 15. It was just really irritating. Sometimes I feel like our chat is really great most of the time. Like 99% of the time, I love our chat and the discussions that happen in it. But I feel like there's other communities and other places on the internet where you're just like, where do these people come from? They got such a stick up their butt about stuff that they can't just chill for 20 minutes, watch something without commenting how it's murder hobo-ish or something. It's like, eh.
You can't ever win with the internet, because if you're not murder hobo-ish, you're not fighting enough. You know, it's all role playing. It's not fun enough. Like, you can't win.
Too much talking, not enough dice rolling. You know, like there's going to be somebody who has that opinion on any which way.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. So but it was just persistent annoyance, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that was my only gripe about the evening watching that stream, was some of the people in the chat were just pestery annoying. But yeah, that's the internet.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because I had to bounce out during the middle of fight. But I think what it is everybody's kind of finding their legs. Like, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of these guys who are streaming have been playing for years beforehand. The guys in Critical Role were playing for 2-3 years before they started streaming. So they had that group dynamic built out already. And even though everybody who's on Saber Dice is like all experienced players, they don't know each other that well. And so they're trying to figure each other out.
A great, I think, analogy of this. Anybody that watched Star Trek The Next Generation, I've watched all the episodes multiple times, but I had not seen the first season in such a long time. When I watched it, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody is awkward.
Oh yeah.
Like the first 4 episodes, it's like, ugh, everybody feels like they don't know what they're doing, you know, but compared to 5 seasons in, when you're 5 through, I think the 8th season or whatever, you're like, wow, these people, they've got everything together. Like how they interact, their own character, all that stuff is really 3-dimensional. While, you know, the first couple of episodes, I was like, I was watching with my wife. My wife had not seen pretty much any of Star Trek, and I was feeling embarrassed. Like, should we just skip some more of these and go to the 2nd or 3rd season, please?
I remember they were very bad.
Yeah, comparatively speaking, you know.
Comparatively speaking,
to the later seasons. So I feel it's the same thing. All the guys had was a Session Zero, you know, ahead of time. And an idea of how their characters were going to be portrayed, and a little bit of how the other characters were, so you kind of know what to expect and how to interact with them. But you know, improv.
Although it didn't hurt that Andrew and Dave, just that first in the Session Zero, the secret session.
Oh yeah, they're gelling. Yeah.
Oh man, they just instantaneously, and then the other 2 guys, I feel bad for them because Dave and Andrew it was the most amazing interactions I had at first one. I mean, everyone was dying. It was awesome.
It's practically like brothers from another mother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so and you know, Oliver, Cody's character, Taking 20, his character is I think a bit standoffish to the rest because of his persona.
Right.
You know, he's like the bard, he's got that background that kind of separates him, and the understanding and learning that kind of separates him from people like Jogo, who thinks he becomes smarter when he puts his glasses on. And the lizard druid that lives in the sewer.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. If I was in that group, I'd be like, no.
eating who knows what as good berries. I kind of got an inkling of an understanding, and I was like, nope, I'm not thinking about this any further. Where he gets those.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, and is Pruitt is a rogue.
Yeah, Pruitt's the rogue.
Yeah. So he is, I think rogues kind of are standoffish anyway. Like, again, you're living outside of the norm of law and order in society, in a sense. So,
well, then they're the two humans, and humans are like often. There's always, in every game system or every movie or everything, humans are kind of isolated from the rest of like the worlds, because humans are too aggressive and too haughty, and it's always the same thing. So how they characterize the characters are great. It's going to take a while for them as people, the characters, not the players, to gel with these two. And then Joko and Jardon also knew each other before.
Yeah.
So it's going to take them a while to gel with each other as character people. About our people, they do have to kind of come into their own naturally.
Yeah, so I think for a first session it went really well, and there was plenty of good RP, and I was laughing at work a little too much while I was typing up different things and typing up data entry stuff. Right. I was laughing way too much at work while I was watching stuff. All right, I've pretty much ignored the chat, so I'm gonna dive in. If you want to talk about something, I'm gonna go look back at the chat.
Yeah, I was about to do the same thing. I guess really what we haven't done 45 minutes in is do a roll call while we go back through and do the look at chat.
Okay, yeah, roll call. Good call on the roll call.
Okay, let's see what people are doing. Wow, there's a lot of conversation going on.
Yeah, it's a lot to read through. I just saw so much chat going by that I didn't read.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I also wish that when you put on glasses, it made you smarter. Tesmek.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah,
and then it just
exactly. Okay, let's give people a little bit of time before I start listing them off while you're going through your side.
Yeah, Robin Steele. Charlatan too. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is it was easier to see Jogo and Jordan's interaction because it was so out in the open and loud, like vivacious, gregarious, like that kind of like out in your face entertainment kind of thing, rather than I feel like he's a bit more reserved. His character is reserved, comparatively speaking. I mean, Jogo was singing as he was drowning a goblin or hobgoblin. He made a song, impromptu song, and started singing it while he was doing it. So, that is a different level of openness, I think. I mean, a rogue that tends to sing out loud while he's doing his job is probably dead.
Yeah.
Or faking as something, he's faking something else, like a performer or something like that. All right. So did you want to do the roll call or I'll do it?
Yeah, I can do the roll. Let me get back to it. Okay. Where are we? Let me get back down to the roll call. Okay, here we go. So, oh crap, there's a lot of random stuff that people are talking about. Okay, here we go. So we got Doug, staff writer editor Doug, my savior from Cleveland, comic book university from Borzate. I don't even know what that is, but I'm sure that's some comic book reference. Tesmic from Australia, Lincoln from Linkoping, Sweden, White Rabbit from Geneva, New York, Jinker from Waterdeep, Renee.
All right. I think we lost Doug. It's because he didn't know that comic book reference, Comic Book University. The internet banned him. All right. Well, I'm going to continue, and hopefully Doug will get back on soon. Renee is Denmark. AJ Kinney is Lopez Island, Washington. Raven, we've got Oz. And Dungeon Dad is Canadia. Zaref Gaming. He misses saying New Mexico. Kirkrish 001, Eureka, California. Ivan, frozen underneath the icy tundras of the north, so Canada. Kyle Ellis, Nelson, BC. David Bliss, Melbourne, Australia. Todd Boyce, Dallas, Texas. Brian F., New York City. And let's see. Kurt, City of Regulus, Plain of Mechanus, working as a cog. We always need good cogs. Cthulhu Kid, Lost in the Madness of the Far Realms. NYR 924, Massachusetts. Jason Serif, jumped again. Jason, where are you, Jason? Wow, I really can't find it. It's like he's disappeared. All right, there was a Jason. I do not know where he was from. John Cyrus, Lincoln. Evil Silly Putty, Minnesota. Beamer, SRQ. Hot and Smoky, and Redmond, Washington. So, let's see. There was a question that I wanted to answer. Oh, he should read the old Eternals comics? Okay. And you say we should host a tabletop LARP camping trip. You would travel a great distance for a Nerdarchy Con. Well, we almost had a Nerdarchy Con this summer, but the convention hall fell through. And oh, you know what? Camping definitely is cheaper. A full camping barbecue trip. That sounds way better than just a Nerdbarbecue. We could rent out a giant section of Wharton State Forest in the Pine Barrens.
Okay, back.
All right, great.
I don't know what happened. I just got disconnected.
I swear there were several questions that just disappeared, so I don't know how that exactly happened, but
let's see.
Oh, there it is. Jason Seifert, Orange County, California. That's where I wanted to go. Okay. And there was definitely another question. The chat is jumping around, oh, there it goes. Brian F., you're asking if we're going to NYCC. Is that the New York City Comic Convention or something?
Yeah.
When is it? That might determine whether or not we can actually make it. So, I mean, I can't, Google, someone can help me out. That would work. All right. Well, thanks, Todd Boyce. I'll let Dave know. That'll make him feel really good about it. Thanks for everybody who's been lively on the different live chats that I've been on while Dave's been away. He has a whole week packed next week between games and guests. So I'm going to be taking a break from the live chats for a bit. I might do tomorrow as well. I don't know. It depends if Dave has something or doesn't, or if there's a game plan. There may be a game plan due to how it was going. So you got cut off. I don't know what happened, but you're back. So what else did you want to discuss? I know we've been jumping around a lot.
Yeah, we've been jumping around a lot. I guess I don't really have a whole lot to talk about. Like I said, I just wanted to. We ended up getting sidetracked quite a bit, but I was, mostly just looking to see what Chad had to say. But we got so sidetracked.
Yeah, I pretty much cleared up the chat stuff while you were off and about.
Okay, cool. That's cool. Yeah, I guess like I guess getting I guess there was one thing that I want to talk about at some point in the future. I want to write a article on is kind of the place that tabletop RPGs have in the pantheon of literature, or not just literature, but narratives as a whole. Like whether it's like movies or music, because obviously like tabletop RPGs come from, or D&D obviously gets pretty heavily influenced from Gerald Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and whatnot. And there are a lot of things that I noticed about when I wrote an article recently that'll be going up on Saturday, I believe. That kind of goes in a little bit about how literature uses morals, and how they eschew specific morals and whatnot, and it got me thinking about the way that D&D kind of fits into that literary canon, as you will, as a whole, because they talk about like slavery is the article's kind of about, is how it's in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you look at like a number of the different monsters and whatnot, but it still has a message in that. If you notice, it's always in the evil races that are associated with it, and even things like the Duragar, who were slaves and then turned around and became slavers.
Mm-hmm.
And
they said, "Oh, this is a really efficient system."
Yeah. Well, I think it's because it talks about how their hearts became twisted and dark, and so then they started, enslaving other races, and it's this really cool commentary on the way that, like, the actions that you take, can have repercussions beyond the immediacy. And I thought it was a really cool, interesting way to look at. I kind of want to take a look at tabletop RPGs in light of its respect to other forms of literature and narratives.
Say that last part again.
Oh, it said. I think because she's getting there in a minute. I was talking about how like the way that tabletop RPGs fit into kind of the pantheon of literature, essentially, like how we fit, because
with focus on moral aspects of.
Yeah, like with moral, because that's actually part of the main purposes of myths and legends and whatnot, is to convey the different morality of societies at the time. So
yeah, I would say by reading the PHB and the Dungeon Master kind of thing, you can kind of get a good understanding of values out of a situation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like specifically what you're saying with slavery, in that like the evil races, some of them keep slaves, right. So that kind of like goes along the bent of slavery is an evil, right. Similarly, there's a lot of emphasis in the construction of the game. There's a lot of emphasis on creating the type of world that you desire, kind of thing. So there's a kind of element to it as well.
Right, exactly. And I go into, because like I go into the case, it's called the case for, at least how I titled it, I'm not sure if it'll get retitled, but the case for including slavery in your game. Because like, even though I think as a whole, like, you're playing a game and part of it is escapism and whatnot, but you can't just watch fluff. Like, I love Fast and the Furious. They're stupid movies, but I love watching them. I can fall asleep halfway through one, wake up and not miss a beat, and I love it.
Oh, yeah. But I also explosion movies. Everybody,
yeah.
A good amount of people can at least enjoy an explosion movie every once in a while.
Right. I love those. And I'll spend probably 70% of my time watching fluff. Like, Guardians of the Galaxies are my favorite movies. They're total fluff garbage. I love them, but, whatever. But, like, I can only watch American History X a couple of times in my life because it's a hard movie to watch. But it's important to watch that movie. So I think sometimes it's important if the game is right and if your player base is right. I think it's important to be able to explore not the greatest elements of the human experience.
This reminds me, my wife and I watched a few movies. She had 2 requests for movies. It was Hacksaw Ridge and Patriot Day, about the Boston bombing.
Right.
And I said, after Patriot Day, I watched Hacksaw Ridge. I thought it was great. Watched Patriot Day, and I said, all right, you owe me 3 superhero movies because I need a break. We don't usually do like, oh, you get this many points, I get this many points, or we'll do something you like, and then I'll do something we like, I like. Right. We don't do that normally, but I was like, I can't take another serious movie for a little bit. I gotta decompress from those movies. So we started. So we started. I was like, oh well, instead of a superhero movie, how about we start watching, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And now she's into it. So we're like watching that a lot. And that, it's the same, same thing. There's like there's some good, questions and kind of like things discussed in that without it being like beat over the head with it. But at the same time, it is like fluffier than like really super serious stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Not just because it's superhero stuff and supernatural things, but because of the nature of episodic things like that. And you've got to have a level of humor to it rather than just being super dark all the time or super serious. There's a level of watchability that, like I can't watch 5 things in a row that are all Patriot Days like things because it's just too much. It's too much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Stuff. Yeah, but it's still good to have that in your life on occasion, as long as but if you do too much, you're not going to whole view of the world will be warped. It's why I don't watch like documentaries a lot. I like information, but like a lot of them are dark. A lot of them are like, look how bad you are as a person.
Oh, well, yeah, if you watch like the environmental stuff and different things like that, or like kind of stuff, you can get into that. But like documentaries overall, like I watch nature documentaries all the time. I think they're very interesting.
Oh, true.
And they can be great D&D ideas for monsters.
Oh yeah,
so
also true.
There's another benefit to it. But yeah, I understand. Like there is that fluff that is enjoyable. But then there's also the like super serious, moralistic questions. And that's why I pretty much exclude most religion and like political stuff and like basically politicized morality questions. I pretty much exclude those from my games just so we can all kind of like have entertainment at that. But I still like hide stuff in that are references to things, but I just never bring them up. So that's kind of how I view like my level of entertainment interest in it. But when I do a super serious horror madness game, all that stuff's going to be in there. Or like a modern game would include all that stuff because it's modern. If it was just like real world modern, that's going to include all the nonsense we have to deal with on a regular basis. It's not just going to be fluff modern fantasy.
Yeah, so exactly.
So there's like kind of like a time and a place for that, and I think it's different things like going through issues with slavery and that whole concept with the different races that do it. That's something that can be, I think, inserted without it being too crazy.
Well, I think too, it depends on like if you're building a very idyllic world, very pastoral and whatnot, you don't want to include slavery. Like you're going to remove those elements even out of the Illithids, where that's their whole, basically what they do is just enslave everybody. Just because it ruins the tone if you include things that are super dark. But if you're playing a game that is like a lot more realistic, or you're willing to insert from time to time, some very serious moments, then including slavery is fine. So it's really about picking the right times and places. And some games, whole games, are not the right time or place.
It's true. Comic book university, non-religious, non-political, ethical problems that takes too much imagination. Well, how about the bioethics of cybernetic implants?
Yeah.
that though you could make religious arguments for it and political arguments for it, there, do we go beyond ourselves, or do we stay as a person and we use things we can grasp in our hand or wear as tools, rather than inserting things and making ourselves different than human? So there's one. That's pretty. I mean, you could, like I said, you can shove religious arguments and you can shove political arguments into that. But I would say that's a pretty. Everyone can argue that from a like non-religious, non-political standpoint.
Well, you also got to be careful too of your audience. Either like things that like maybe like it's going to cause too much of a rift because of social political. Like everybody has like different political views,
Yeah.
And you'll or like some people, maybe they have experiences in their life that'll make it too uncomfortable from them, and you don't want to create a conflict. So you always got to, and that's the thing I talk about in my article is because like I like to include a lot of things in there. Like I like the idea of including things like even like I have, and I haven't had a chance to insert it yet, but I want to have like a thing where like a little girl walks by and like tries to pickpocket you, and you find out that like if the players decide to pay attention, you see that she's trying to hide bruises. So then so then you go find this person that's abusing this child and deal with it. Well, if I have someone who's had that problem in the past, I'm not including that because that's gonna become too painful for them. So I like to talk to my players and make sure what things are cool and not cool, or same thing like how you deal with other elements. Like okay, so like I'm an atheist, but I take religion seriously in the context of society because religion is a big part of society. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to like push one religion over another. That's why D&D has its own pantheon. So you've got
it helps all that.
Yeah, because like to me, religion is, if gods are real, if God, the Abrahamic God came down and like presented himself as a person, I'd be like, well, I'm not an atheist anymore because I can see him. Like I can't deny that fact, and that's what happens in the D&D world.
Yes, that happens in D&D. So it's like an atheist in the D&D world is a little harder to deal with because you're like, hey, you're kind of the odd man out. I mean, like my God talked to me the other day, and here's these powers he gave me.
Exactly. So I take it
I just resurrected that person. Yeah, so it's a little far-fetched to be an atheist in a Dungeons and Dragons world. That's for sure.
So so in my games that I'm actually kind of building a big campaign guide for myself because all those 8 hours that I do for each prep, part of that is building the world a little bit for that little area. And so I want to just create one big one so I can always use that world. And part of that is when you have gods that literally can walk the earth, religion is going to be a pretty significant element of society.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely. Like I had a campaign of my Virium campaign, which I wrote a few articles on, just kind of like the creation story back in the day on the website. And like there's the god of chaos and his son, Vir, who creates all the order in the world. Basically, he's like the order out of like what is that called? Like a matrix Boltzmann brain or whatever like that. Basically, like an organized brain, fully formed consciousness out of nothing, out of chaos.
Oh right, yeah.
So like he's that, and then he creates the entirety of the world. So like he lived on a mountain, like people knew where he was for a while, and then he disappears. Basically, and then he becomes more of like a myth and legend. But when he was like walking around on the earth on Virium's world, it was very evident that he was a god and he was there. So over time he's still. It's kind of like in the fantasy world, he is not fully present, but his influence is readily understood. And the modern D&D, like I had it in 3 segments. In the modern campaign, he is more of used as a kind of like mythological tool with dealing with the populace. And in future, he's more of like kind of like, oh, that's our historical understanding of the world. Here, look at all this magitech. And but he's still but that's just a change in the social, how the society and culture is constructed. Vir didn't change.
Right.
He just stopped showing up to people, and like over the thousands of years, that's what occurred in the understanding of the culture's concept and the individual people concept of what Vir means to them. So it's kind of like it's an interesting story arc, and the idea was I'm taking the characters when I do dive into the game a little more and actually make the setting complete. I'm going to take the characters. They're going to have a fantasy game, and then I'll show a modern game, and then I'll show a future game, and they can see like the kind of different things that happen throughout the eras. So we kind of running over. So is there any last minute thing before Doug has to start?
No,
banning?
That's yeah. And until Doug starts banning people,
he was worried, but our chat's awesome. So we don't have to worry about that for the most part.
No, I have nothing else. It's been a great chat, and I love the Nerdarchy fan base, and how overall I think that we've got a very good fan base, and that's hard for the internet.
Yeah, it's a welcome change from the rest of the internet, that's for sure. Kurt, your question. I would say that you wouldn't be able. It's like the idea you wouldn't be able to tell, like, oh, some god returns to the world. Well, we would just say he's an alien now. We'd just be like, oh, that guy's an alien. Where's your ship? Do you transdimensionally teleport? Like, how does this work? We'd be thinking of technology reasons why some kind of returned god is hanging out. We'd be making up our own understanding of what occurred rather than what they're telling us actually is occurring. So that's that kind of thing. So, all right. So that's going to have to be it. I've got some business meetings to attend to, and thanks again, Josh, for joining us. Thanks again to everybody who donated to get the Nerdarchy Dave and Ted to LA. They had a fantastic time. I met a whole bunch of great people. Got a second promise of an interview from Matt Mercer. So, third time, and by fairy law, he must do it. But, if he doesn't believe in fairies, I guess that's null and void. And and as well as, any of our Patreons, thanks again for all your help with making everything run here at Nerdarchy, because it's the YouTube. We didn't get demolished by the YouTube adpocalypse, but every time YouTube does something different, it just lets us know we cannot guarantee our funds from YouTube. No matter how many videos we do, we just have to have another income, or well, Dave's our full-time staff right now, so that's a problem if we can't pay him. So thanks again for everybody that helps pay the bills. And if you can't help us out monetarily, please, like, share, and subscribe for things or content that you do enjoy. Check out the website, and, comment and tweet out, share whatever you want to do on your social media platforms for anything that you find interesting. So until next time, thanks again, Josh, for joining me, and stay nerdy.
Thank you. Stay nerdy.